Welcome. This podcast is a collaboration of Religica and URI, United Religions Initiative.
Dr. Lee Cuba is a professor of sociology at Wellesley College. His research includes a focus on how migrants feel at home in new places. In 2017, Dr. Cuba joined URI as a consultant to launch its impact assessment program, known within the organization as the P19 Project. Take a listen.
I think URI, those are three of many principles that drive its work. Inclusion, because it comes with a welcoming voice to anyone who comes to URI or with whom they meet. Authenticity, because they know that people have to speak from their heart, from deep within themselves, to do anything that is meaningful to them or to others in the world.
Going off the first two, how do you see the way that these show up in URI as a gift to the world?
I think that one of the things that always struck me that was interesting and unique about URI was that they wanted not to be hierarchical. They didn't want to speak top down to anyone. They wanted to understand the world as others see it from their perspective. And in welcoming people into the URI community, they are very, very guarded about issuing dictums, lots of rules for membership. They respect different traditions, and they certainly aren't asking people to move away from their own faith traditions in being a part of URI. They have a sense, I think, that only these large, intractable problems like poverty and war and violence can be addressed through the efforts of many people of many faiths, many walks of life, and certainly many parts of the world. And so the kind of essence, I think, of inclusion, there would be no URI if it didn't value inclusion. It's what they're all about. But I think there is also a way in which I think you can allow people in, let's say, admission to a group or an organization doesn't necessarily mean inclusion. And I think that's a big difference that many groups strive with today. It's not just about allowing people in, but it's about actually seeing their perspective, understanding the world from their point of view, and making that the work that you do. So that the work that large, diverse group of people or countries or associations is enriched by a strong understanding of where people are and the values that they hold.
Right. And it brings up the idea of, like, because they chose accelerating peace, obviously, is the theme. What do you think of when you hear that phrase, and why do you think in this moment today it's so important that we're accelerating peace rather than trying to achieve peace or reach for peace? Or
I think there's a sense that what people have experienced, maybe locally or nationally, seems to be something that's happening in much broader and expansive ways. And realizing that people away from us, near us, have been trying to deal with these issues, trying to achieve, right, need to do more than that. The power that comes through joining together, the notion of acceleration, I think, which is a gathering up, right, a lot of power, a lot of energy, moving it ahead, will only come through large-scale efforts. And again, large-scale efforts that have been built on grassroots foundations. I think that's what's most important.
What has stopped us from achieving this peace that we've been working for?
I think part of the answer to that question is that too often we think that peace is this static thing. It's the mountaintop that we're going to reach. And once we're there, the world is a peaceful place, right? And we know, of course, that's not true. It's a dynamic, ever-changing, hard to reach thing. So part of it is that it's always shifting. It's always moving. Right? Part of it is that it's very hard work. And because it is shifting and it's very hard work, I think it takes us back to where we started. It requires collaboration among a lot of people with a lot of different skills to help us keep chasing that thing that we know can be chased in a different way. So I think, thinking of our work as ongoing, thinking of the work as something that we should all be invested in is really, really important part of that. And again, speaking from my own personal point of view, I'm a college professor. I am extremely encouraged by what I see in my students today and the kind of commitment that they are having to wanting the world to be a very different world than the one in which they're living.
So in thinking about that, when you think about our education system, so that since it's one of the places you work, as you've read or listened to students reflect, if there's any interesting or challenging questions that they've ever asked you or in their reflection or that you've encountered in teaching.
Well, I do. I ask students in my classes, I teach classes that many of them have to do with public writing, so writing op-eds or book reviews, writing grants for nonprofit organizations. We ask them to reflect on those experiences, to think about what is your voice, with what authority to speak. I think those are really good questions to ask because they're humbling questions. They make you think about who you are and with what authority you say things and how you can say some things and not others, and then how that can influence, right, your presentation of self and of the issue. So I think that both reflection on who you are as a writer, as somebody who's doing public work, or as someone who is engaged in serious service work alongside nonprofits. We don't have enough of that in higher education. Reflection generally, most of what students write is for their professor. It's not for others, right? And most of the time, our classrooms don't allow a lot of room for reflection. We see that as in a tug of war with substance. So the less we talk about the book, the less you're going to learn in the course. And that's a false dichotomy, of course. Reflection deepens learning. We know that experiential opportunities outside of the classroom deepen conceptual understanding. So far from being kind of a waste of time, I think we need to think more as educators about how we can make that more useful time for our students.
Are there any stories of your experience or their experience that stick out that really kind of get at the heart of peace building in your mind? And are there qualities of these stories that you think that this is what makes it a story about peace building?
So one was we were in Cambodia and we were invited to attend. CC was having an event for, let's say, middle school age children from different schools where Buddhist monks were invited to come and speak about what the Buddha thought about the environment. And Maria Crespo, who was traveling with me, was invited to speak about what did Jesus think about the environment. So it was a bit of kind of cross-faith views on the environment as told through these two practicing religions, beliefs, groups. And what was fascinating is that the children came from different schools to this event, and how at the beginning of the day, they sat with their friends and sat with the people they knew. They were invited throughout to ask questions, write questions down, and have them answered back. And then by the end of this event, 2 hours later, they had mixed up. They were all talking to each other, laughing, asking each other questions about the kind of school they went to and what they did and what they thought about what you think the monk said about that. Do you believe that's a good thing? And it was just how in a short period of time, bringing people together around learning, but also around getting to know someone who's you didn't know before you left, was a really engaging moment of, I think, seeing again people who are different than you in a different way and meeting them.
When you're thinking about the values that define leadership, what are some things that you think are essential for people to have in order to do this kind of work effectively?
Again, my disciplinary training is sociology. There's a famous sociology at the turn of the last century named Georg Simmel, who is very interested in small group interactions and dyads and triads. But he wrote in one part, he quotes another saying, "I am their leader, therefore I must follow them." And I think what Simmel was getting at, right, is this notion of what now people have seen, as kind of transformative leadership. It's been called in the literature, but it's the idea of one's leadership skills are emergent from others who are seeking to make change, to do something different. It's not about my vision, right? It's about this notion of where we need to go and being able to discern that and to articulate that well, in a voice that is, again, back to authenticity, that speaks the truth of what people are yearning for. And I think people who are able to do that, who are able to act in some ways as someone who amplifies their voice, but also is their voice, is a really important part about leadership. I think leadership is also about enjoying working with people. There are people, like project people that like that, and there are people who don't like that so much. They're much, more sustained and satisfied by, let's say, doing a traditional scholarly kind of thing, right? Doing archival work and writing a very important book about a subject or about a person. Other people derive their energy, I think, from working with others, sometimes others who strongly disagree about things, trying to find a way to move forward, not necessarily to agree with one another, but to move forward. And I think, for me, the notion of trying to understand, to get what it means to have a message that achieves consensus for people. It doesn't mean everyone thinks it's the best thing, right? It means that people are willing to say, for now, we think this is something we can all, do.
What do you think is like one question that's essential that we're asking ourselves or asking the world today that's going to move us to a place where we want to be?
Maybe it's several questions that all are trying to be the same question for me. I'm very concerned about, we need to see, maybe it is a simple golden rule. Maybe we need to see that what we do for others is doing something that affects us. It's too easy to see things in individualistic terms and not in social contextual terms, culturally contextual terms. In the United States, it's a good example. It's crazy to think that the income inequality isn't going to affect everyone here. It's just crazy. It's crazy to think that educational disadvantage is a good thing for anyone. And I think that, to me, if we could get people to see that it's not just about, I'm a nice person and I care about you. They could see it from the standpoint of self-interest, and they actually should. We should all see it from the standpoint of everyone's interest, including our own, because a well-educated, a well-paid workforce is one that helps everyone.
If you would like to know more about United Religion's initiative, read stories of interfaith in action, visit www.uri.org. And to learn more about Religica and our allies, take a look at www.religica.org. Thanks.